So no one's watching live TV anymore. That's often the message that we'll take away from a conference like this. And it will seem to be backed up when we think about the anecdotal evidence of our own viewing and like what our friends are doing. But the reality isn't quite like that. I'm going to take you through some of the data that we get from our connected TV platform, where we can see what people are actually doing. But first I'm going to play a short video to introduce Freesat.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's do this.
I'm on fire. I tell her, baby.
Want to see some more?
Oh, God, yes.
Is that right?
That is absolutely right.
The level of analysis we're very proud of.
Wow, this is awesome.
It's super exciting.
I know you are a fan of British television.
I'm the best you've ever had.
That's right.
If you think I'm burning out, I never am. I'm on fire. I'm on fire.
Most incredible thing I've ever seen.
That's brilliant. Well done, you.
Who can ask for more?
So what's the catch, I hear you ask?
You have to commit.
Truth or lie?
I think it's a lie.
Yes, it was a lie.
Fireball.
And who can argue with that?
That's how you do it.
Got it.
It's going to be wonderful.
Would you like to see it?
Oh, go on, indulge me.
It's marvellous and distinctive.
Fireball.
You're going to love this.
I'm loving that.
I'm on fire. I tell her, baby. I'm on fire. I tell her, baby. I'm a
Fireball.
So that's Freesat. Our experience is all about a hybrid world where we bring together broadcast and IP content as seamlessly as we can. I'll quickly run you through the main sections of our service. This is our home screen. It's the hub and the jumping off point to all of the sections that are in the Freesat service. And you'll see that we keep live TV at the heart of it with this large video window. Our TV guide launches to a now and next view, so it's really easy to see what's on right now. We have a 7-day forwards guide, as you'd probably expect, and we also have a 7-day rollback guide, where we have catch-up listings for certain channels. We currently have 15 on-demand services available on Freesat. That's everything from the main broadcaster players, we've got SVOD and TVOD services, and we've also got some free other on-demand, including a couple of kids services that we've recently launched. Showcase is our editorial recommendation service. It's all about highlighting the best that Freesat has to offer, whether that's celebrating the big hitters or surfacing some of the hidden gems. And we break it into on TV, so you can work out what not to miss, and on demand, so that there's always something that you can watch right now. And we have a platform search, which at the moment returns results from the forwards guide and our catch-up data. So of course, any insight is only as good as the data that it's derived from. And any data is only as reliable as the context in which it's collected and presented. So it's worth spending a couple of minutes talking about the Freesat audience, the data that we collect, and just as importantly, what we don't know. So first of all, how does Freesat's audience compare to the UK as a whole? Well, we're a TV platform in 2 million homes, so as you can imagine, we have a pretty broad and diverse audience. The two main differences are that Freesat skews older and wealthier than the UK population. There's also a bit of a geographic skew, as we're more likely to be in a higher proportion of homes in those areas of the country where the DTT signal's perhaps a little less reliable. And so Wales is one example of an area where we over-index. Our data is based on Freesat's connected set-top box audience, and that's currently around 250,000. And the majority of those are PVRs, which can record, and we also have some zappers, which is the word that we use for those that don't have a hard drive. There are some caveats. We have an opt-in model, which means we explicitly ask for users' permissions before we collect their data, and we give them the opportunity to change their mind at any time. It's a census-level anonymous data, so we don't have any personal or demographic information. It's household-based, which means we're just tracking what that box is tuned to, so we don't know how many people are watching at any one time. And this is covering viewing on TV. Obviously, as we all know, a lot of people watch on demand through mobile devices or websites, and that's not covered here. So we track consumption, we track what people are watching on Freesat, whether that's TV channels, recordings, or on demand. For on-demand services, we're tracking the time they spend in the service, not what they're watching while they're in there. And we track navigation, so we can see how people are using Freesat's user interface. So I'm going to take you through 5 hopefully interesting pieces of insight that are driven from our audience measurement data, and it's mainly focusing on how VOD and linear coexist in the hybrid world. I'm going to start with a groundbreaking piece of news. Okay, maybe it's not groundbreaking. I doubt anyone's surprised to hear that VOD share of viewing is growing. What you may be surprised to see is that it still accounts for less than 8% of viewing overall on our platform. And remember, this isn't all of Freesat, this is our connected base. But it's still a 17% increase year on year. And when we look just at zappers, it's proportionally quite a lot higher, at about 10.5%, and it's seen an almost identical year-on-year growth. But interestingly, linear has been almost unaffected by the rise in VOD. It still accounts for over 75% of viewing overall, and it's had a broadly flat share across the year. The main impact has actually been on PVR, which has seen a 9% year-on-year drop and now accounts for about 11.5% of viewing. In fact, based on this trajectory, our analysis is indicating that VOD will overtake PVR at some point in 2019. In fact, to put my head above the parapet, we think it's going to be February or March. So maybe we'll come back in a couple of years and you can find out if we're right. So if we move on and look at VOD's reach overall, you can see that a large majority of the Freesat audience has used the VOD service since we started collecting data back in the end of 2015. And that on a monthly basis, just shy of 2/3 of our audience will use VOD. So what's perhaps more surprising here is that on a monthly basis, 1/3 of the audience don't watch any VOD, and there's 16% of people that have never used the VOD service ever. And remember that these are our connected audience. These are people that have gone out and bought an internet-enabled set-top box, and they've bothered to connect it to the internet for seemingly no reason. But still, with 8% viewing share overall and a 65% monthly reach, you can see how important it is for a hybrid platform like ours to have a good VOD offering. So next we're going to move on and have a look at how those VOD services are comparing to our TV channels. And the summary is that they do pretty well. Unlike with TV channels, on Freesat we can support both mainstream and niche VOD services on the platform. So I'm going to show you the top 10 channels by reach on Freesat last month, or September. See, last month was quite close. You won't be surprised by the first 5. It's the main PSB channels. But there in position 7 is iPlayer. It was used by almost half of our audience. And that's not a one-off. iPlayer typically reaches more people on our channel, on our service, than the top 5 channels and BBC4. And we think that BBC4 might be a Freesat specific skew based on our audience demographics. So if we then look at the list by share, the first thing to note is that BBC News and CBeebies are both making the top 10. So it shows that people watching those channels are watching for extended periods. But you've probably noticed Netflix is there, and it's in position 6. So at about 23%, Netflix reaches a much smaller proportion of our audience each month than the broadcast catch-up services. But that segment of our audience that uses Netflix are using it a lot. You'll also see that YouTube makes the top 10 with a slightly strange rendition of the numbers, but never mind. So when you think that our audience skews older than the general UK population, that's perhaps surprising. And it's also showing that those people in our audience that use YouTube are watching for extended periods of time, which perhaps runs counter to the idea of YouTube being for short or snacking content. So on the face of it, the VOD services are doing really well, and of course they are. But it's worth remembering that BBC and ITV channels together account for 35 to 40% of viewing share each month. So when we look at it as a bar chart, you can see how the actual share of viewing of any of the VOD services is actually quite small overall. And there's another interesting point to make. At any point in time, a channel only has one programme that it can offer you, and that's compared to a whole library of content in a VOD service. So we're not really comparing like with like. Take Right Now, for instance. I grabbed this yesterday at 10 o'clock. So you can imagine it's a fairly accurate reflection of what the Freesat audience are watching right this minute. And when it's running live, it's ticking through on a second-by-second basis, this chart showing the last half an hour. And when we look at Netflix, you can see it's doing pretty well. It's got 2.75% audience share, which puts it in the top 10 of what people are watching at that time. But if we add in BBC One, we can see that Netflix is now dwarfed. BBC One has a 30% share. And what that means is that there's more than 10 times as many people that are watching Homes Under the Hammer right this minute than there are watching everything that's in Netflix's huge library. So I think that really speaks to the continuing value of live TV, and for so many reasons. There's the ease or the laziness of not having to always choose what you want to watch. There's having the TV on in the background without it needing to have your full attention. And there's that human need for synchrony, the rhythm of a routine day in, day out, and knowing that like other people are doing the same thing. And that probably explains why, historically on Freesat, the most common request that we would get from current customers and potential ones was always for Dave. So for those of you that don't know, Dave is a UK TV channel that's really popular here in the UK, funnily enough. And for various reasons that I won't go into, we were unable to have Dave on our platform for quite some time. And we get lots of, shall we say, feedback that our audience would like it. This is a story with a happy ending. We finally launched Dave on Freesat in the summer to a wave of gratitude on social media, and it's doing really, really well. So for us, it's really important that we don't forget how valuable our channels are and that we continue to grow our channel lineup. So despite the differences in distribution and the fact that VOD services have this whole library of content that you can choose from at any time, we actually see that day in, day out, they behave quite like channels. The first thing I'm going to look at is the day curve. This is the chart I always have trouble to explain, but what it's looking at is linear and VOD and the proportion of the users of those modes that are active at any point. So the blue line is linear and the pink line is VOD. And what you can see is, as you'd expect, they both have a phenomenally high share in the evening. But you see that the VOD is ramping up more steeply. So linear starts to build its higher share of audience earlier in the evening. And also VOD is dropping off quicker. So linear is maintaining its share for a bit later into the evening. Although interestingly, both are peaking at almost exactly the same time at 9 o'clock. So that's the overall patterns. We'll next look at a couple of channels and a couple of VOD services to see how they compare. So first, BBC One and E4. So you'll see how that same day curve applies, but there's lots of peaks and troughs throughout the day driven by the schedule. In fact, that big spike for E4 is Hollyoaks, which shows how important those key programme brands are for our channels. If we move on and look at some VOD services, the thing that jumps out at you is just how much smoother the day curves are. In fact, Netflix looks pretty much like a channel, and it looks very close to how the overall VOD day curve goes. I've also included YouTube, which kind of breaks the mold a bit, because as you can see, although it's still getting its highest share of its audience in the evening, it's a much flatter curve overall, and in fact has a small but noticeable spike in the morning. Now that could be kids watching, or it could be that people don't really think of YouTube as telly, and so they're not transposing their TV viewing habits to YouTube like they do for the other VOD services. That's my And the other thing that we see is that consistently VOD gets a higher share of viewing at the weekend. So each of those big spikes represents a weekend in September. And that seems to back up anecdotal evidence that we have about binging. And it's saying to me that there's a segment of our audience who are really using VOD, they're using on-demand for that appointment to view. It's the destination when they've got time on their hands and they want to watch those really kind of key programs for them. So moving on, even as VOD use increases, it's important that we don't forget how valuable the schedule still is. So the main broadcasters are all moving away from having pure catch-up play, we'll hear about that later I'm sure, to becoming more of a hub, to use the ITV term, for the content that's available on their platform. But a common theme that's emerging is how they're using the schedule to drive people there. Take Restart TV. So Restart enables the audience to watch a programme from the beginning by linking from the EPG into the on-demand service. And we launched that for BBC channels earlier this summer. We're seeing some really encouraging results. So in the 3 months since launch, it's now reached just under a quarter of our audience. And those people that are using Restart in October, they used it for, on average, 3 or 4 times each. So you can see that it's providing a really useful function. But Restart really comes into its own when there's a clash of key programmes in the schedule. I'm going to give you an example. Last month, the Great British Bake Off, some of you may have heard of that, made its Channel 4 debut. And because it was 75 minutes long, it ran until 9:15. And that meant that it clashed with the new series of Dr. Foster that was starting on BBC One at 9 p.m. And that was our highest ever day for Restart. It saw a 66% uplift compared to our previous peak. And I think this is quite incredible. The number of people that watched Dr. Foster through Restart that night is the same number that watched it through their PVR. And when you think how new that is, that really shows the shift in behaviour. And talking about Bake Off, I don't want to steal Sarah's thunder. I'm sure she's going to talk about it some more, but All 4 saw its highest ever day of use on Freesat the night that Bake Off launched. And this wasn't ramping up slowly over the course of the week. We started seeing it rise almost immediately after the programme ended. So this is kind of your classic catch-up behaviour. And it includes the quite staggering statistic that of people on our platform that had never used All 4 before, 5% used it that night, which I think is great. And it's not just VOD that's benefiting from the schedule. I think to talk to Faz's point earlier about Love Island, they saw loads and loads of people simulcasting through ITV Hub on mobile devices or the web. And I think the theory behind that is that it's young people who wanted to be watching it in the moment, but they didn't want to be sat in front of the television alongside their parents. So you can see how that's event-driven, schedule, appointment to view telly, just using these new distribution methods to meet it. And if we look at it from the other side, we're starting to see more and more online specific content being commissioned. But the schedule is still being used to drive awareness and usage of it. So this is The End of the Effing World, which it's a 6-part drama that was released on All 4 last week. And the first episode was put on Channel 4 to coincide with it. And I know that Channel 4 do that with Walter Presents, which is world drama series as well. And similarly, BBC 3 moved online last year, but they still broadcast quite a lot of their programmes on BBC 2, helping to raise awareness and generate their online audience. So even when the main home of a programme is online, we shouldn't underestimate how important the schedule is in helping people to use it. And my final point is that we really shouldn't underestimate the importance of the TV guide. I've got a couple of slides that look at about how people are using the user interface in this hybrid world. Now this shows the most commonly used buttons on the Freesat remote control. And the first point to make is that people still channel surf. Channel up is our most used button, and channel down is number 3. And we also need to remember how important channel numbers are, as we see direct number entry, so putting in 101 to get to BBC One, etc., is in 5th position. But my main point here is about the TV guide, specifically the TV guide button. It's a really, really popular button. In fact, in our home screen, the TV guide is the default option in the menu, but people are still overwhelmingly likely to press the button to get there rather than go through the menu. In fact, even when they're sat on this screen, with TV guide highlighted in the menu, they're still just as likely to press the TV guide button as they are to press OK. So that speaks to me about how ingrained that behaviour is for TV audiences. People have learnt that behaviour over years or even decades, that you press a button to get to the TV guide, and it's not something that they're quickly changing. So I think it's kind of something that we should remember when we look to design new UIs. And just to reiterate that point, this screen here shows the most popular channels, most popular screens in Freesat's UI. Now the one-line guide appears automatically when you change channel, so I'm kind of discounting that, which means that the TV guide is the most popular screen on Freesat, and by quite some distance. In fact, it's accessed just under 3 times per viewing session. Now, recordings is actually more popular on our platform here than on demand, but there's some interesting data seems to be suggesting. Now, we need to do a bit more analysis on this because it's quite hard for us to track it. But you may remember a piece of research from a few years ago that I've been quoting, which is all about how when people are looking for something to watch, they go to the TV guide, and then they go to their recordings, and only if they can't find anything there do they go to on demand. And now our data seems to suggest that once people go to the TV guide, they're then more likely to go to on demand. As I said, I still need to do more work into this, but if so, that's a real example of shifting behaviour. And it starts to imply that perhaps recordings is becoming for those things that people really, really need to watch, and they go straight there. But then if they're in more of a browsing, what's available, what can I watch? They're still going to the TV guide first, but then they're going to on-demand after. And a final point on our TV guide. We designed the Now and Next view based on user research that the main reason people go to TV guide is to find something to watch that's on right now. And actually the amount of information in a grid can make it quite hard to do that. It's quite a high cognitive load. And now we've got some data for it, we can see that that's really, really working. In fact, 80% of the times that people launch the TV guide on our platform, they never leave the Now and Next template. And we looked for it last week and saw that 40% of TV guide users in the whole week didn't leave that template once. So of course, the grid, the main TV guide is still really important for planning, but you can see how this small innovation of Now and Next is helping the TV guide to do its core job really, really well. So to sum up, at Freesat, we certainly don't see a world where broadcast schedules are disappearing, but we know that viewing habits are changing, and we see it as a fantastic opportunity. I've shown how VOD is eating into PVR share of viewing. But for me, one reason why I think that the change hasn't been more pronounced is that content in VOD is still siloed into the players. And that's fine if you know exactly what you're looking for, but it makes it really hard to browse what's available or to choose between if you're following a few different series in different services. So for me, to take VOD to the next level, it's all about disaggregation. It's about freeing up the content to the platform level to make it really easy for viewers to find the stuff that they want or to discover something new. So I think that TV platforms have a really, really important role to play in that, to bring together live TV and on-demand, and to make it really easy and intuitive to help the viewers find what they want. And we've started doing that a little bit with Showcase already. Our on-demand section already has picks from all of the broadcasters and increasingly stuff from our pay VOD services as well. And our roadmap's all about doing more of it, more aggregation, recommendations, bookmarking, and intelligent search. So hopefully you'll start seeing some of those come through to the service over the next year or so.
Thank you, Chloe. We've got some roaming mics. I have a question.
Okay.
So I'm going to kick off the questions and then we've got time for a couple of questions. The PVR debate that we always have.
Yep.
Do you think the features like Restart and blurring that line between live and VOD helps with some of the PVR kind of behaviour?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what we've seen already. Yeah, so of those people that use Restart for Dr. Foster, some of them are probably people that just stumbled upon it, but you can imagine it's a high-profile program. Quite a lot of people may have recorded it, but when they tuned over, they just saw it in the guide, and it's such an easy way to launch. Yeah. So yeah, the more that you can integrate those access points into the EPG, the easier it is for people to use the on-demand, and so the less likely they are to rely on the PVR. Yeah.
And questions from the floor?
Thanks, Christian from DR. Thanks for a great presentation. And I think, first of all, we see the same thing from our part. Live is nowhere dead or dying. However, I was wondering about your data points about Netflix and YouTube. I guess those data points are through your platform.
Yes. So that's
and do you have any data on your customers' usage of those products on the side or over the top?
So we don't get any data from that, obviously. I'm not sure if we get more qualitative research, because we do a sort of quarterly omnibus survey where we go out and ask. But no, the data that we're looking at is from people viewing on their Freesat box. But what we find is that most of the people who've won those boxes, it is in their primary living room box. And so it's probably going to be that kind of go-to, switch it on and then choose something to watch. But yeah, there's no denying that there's a chance that people are watching Netflix and YouTube through other devices as well.
Hi, thanks. That was great. David at the BBC. One of the concerns, I think, in the industry is that hidden within those numbers is that the younger cohort aren't doing that, and that the older viewers are smoothing out those numbers, and increasingly as pensioners just get older and older and older and live longer and just watch telly all day, they smooth the numbers out. That's definitely a concern that we've seen in some of our research. It's shown in some of the Ofcom research as well. What do you guys think about it? Because I think definitely younger viewers do need those Saturday night zeitgeist and sporting events for live, but I mean, how do you see it when it's broken down by demo groups?
So for our audience data like that, we don't break it down by demo. So that's our overall platform viewing, and you're right that we do have an audience that skews older. But I guess a couple of things I'd pull out is how you can see that CBeebies was in the top 10 of channels by share. So that shows that it's still generating that kind of audience. And I think there was a stat about how Bake Off has driven Channel 4 getting a really, really high young audience. So yeah, you're right that sort of those programs will keep driving it. So yeah, there's no doubt that there is a direction of travel. I think what I'm saying is that it's a lot slower than people in this industry might think.
And actually, I got a question, Chloe, taking up that point as well. So I'm guessing, well, looking around, I think we're all linear. When VOD launched in, say, 2005, I mean, we're all linear people. VOD launched into a linear world, and we're linear people who got used to VOD. Yeah, but the next generation, well, there is a generation out there born after 2005 who have only known VOD. When do you think that generational baton might pass, where VOD becomes the prime mode for watching content rather than linear? I mean, how far away is that?
I couldn't possibly say. Yeah, I think we're talking, for me, it's not happening imminently. I think there is some evidence that implies that people do come back to TV as they get a bit older, but less so than they have in the past. And I think the point I made earlier around how even when VOD can provide that real convenience of being able to binge, being able to watch when you want, there's all those other reasons that TV are fulfilling that aren't going to go away. The synchrony, the just having the TV on in the background. So yeah, it might fall off a bit, but we're not seeing it jumping off a cliff just yet.
Any other questions for Chloe?
Hi, Olivia from Phoebe Play. So I know one of the things that we've discussed before is the challenge of linear TV not being seen as normal telly anymore. So particularly Netflix coming out with one of their requirements for preferred TV manufacturers to be that you press standby, and if you were previously watching Netflix the night before, it just goes to Netflix and not live TV. I know it's scary. What else would you have to say about that and how we can meet that challenge in the future?
About that thing specifically?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's obviously a concern because so much TV is kind of habit driven. You turn your TV on, you see what's on, and then you might be very driven to a particular service, whether that's on a recording or a VOD service for content, or you're in more of a browsing mode. And so, yeah, the thing with that Netflix point is that if the TV is turning itself onto Netflix, then your, well, what shall I watch browsing mode becomes very much siloed into that world. So I suppose the two things I'd say is that there's habit about, it would be interesting to know how many people are just turning their TV off in Netflix or how much you're still kind of exiting and still feeling that version of going in and then coming out again. And then the other thing is to the point about the more that we can get the platforms providing that aggregation, and so your roots in start becoming about, I like content from lots of different places, and so therefore I'm trusting the platform to provide that to me, rather than having to make a decision. And increasingly, there's a segment of our audience who, when they're having to make that decision of where to look, are going into Netflix and looking there first. So I think it speaks to the importance of having a really strong platform offering.
I think you're absolutely right.
I think that's it. Thank you very much. And by the way, it's Chloe's birthday. Woohoo!